there's a problem within Punjabi culture or something. They use as a way of justice. Let's say you are of a tribe, you have wronged me somehow, then to correct that wrong, I am allowed for someone from my tribe gang one of your daughters, and that would, resolve that problem.
Momus is a writer, podcaster, and self-proclaimed freethinker
whose nomadic journey from Kuwait to Karachi to Essex shaped his fearless voice.
What's your theory on why they have groomed and raped, handed around like sweeties these white girls? Why are they doing this?
It is a fundamental thing to do with Islam. The way that they see it, that they are conquering these countries by their people, and these are the bounties of their conquest. The way that they can squash the spirit of the people is to degrade their own people that much.
So what does it say about the British that we've let this happen?
The British people are so far removed that they cannot understand those sort of ideology anymore, because they're so far behind in their time that they could have understood this.
Or is there some weird thing in the culture that they just like really, really young girls?
It is a cultural thing, so they don't see that as a wrong. But to explain that, if we just say they're evil and just dismiss all of it, we don't really get to the bottom of why it's happening, why, and also why it's important for us to stop immigration coming from these countries.
As a Pakistani, there is prestige to being able to say, I'm with a white girl.
They don't see them as prestigious or something. They only see them as things for conquest, as horrible as it is to say. They do really have racial hatred, like especially Pakistanis. Things that they do have deep-rooted racial hatred against the white British people.
Do you think there's something about the culture of the Punjabis to what has been happening in places like Momus?
Those sort of ideologies come into. And as the left has progressively, with their Marxist ideologies, taken over most of the British culture, they're going to use that as well to their advantage, and that's what they're doing to their advantage. And the propensity of them marrying their cousins, first cousins, so much, 60-70%, that's going to result in eventually
reducing IQ slightly, yes. Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Jolly Heretic on tour. I have a very special guest for you today, and that is Momus. And Momus is a commentator on such issues, a social commentator, I suppose, particularly on such issues as Islam. And today we are going to talk about aspects of Islam in the UK. So Momus, hello.
Hello.
Can you tell us a bit about you first? So you're originally from Pakistan?
Well, I was born in Kuwait, so I'm originally, I guess, from there, from the Gulf. My parents are from Pakistan, and I lived in Pakistan for 9 years after my teens, and then I came to England in 2010.
But you were saying earlier that what you didn't like.
I couldn't assimilate with Pakistan, I would say. Kuwait was a bit different, even though it's a Gulf state. It's not as restricted as Saudi Arabia. It's more like Dubai, you would say. So there's a bit more lax culture, a bit more laxed when it comes to Islam itself. When I went to Pakistan, people were a bit too different for me to assimilate into.
And you were saying that you've been told by your father or your parents about the pre-General Huq, is that his name?
Zia ul Haq, yeah.
Yeah, the pre-him Pakistan, where it wasn't a fundamentalist state.
Yeah, it was a bit different. Like from their youth, what they tell me, probably like when they left was during that time, anyways, after General Zia. But the Pakistan was changing at that time. It didn't had transformed yet. So Pakistan before, what they described was a bit different than what I found. The Pakistan that I found was, was a lot more radical, more Islamized. Things like the things like arts and literature were not that much of a focus of the people, and I found that very hard to assimilate into because I couldn't connect them as my people.
Right. So when you say my people, I mean Pakistan is quite ethnically diverse, I suppose you could say. There's not only there are a number of different states within, whatever you call them, within Pakistan, provinces. So the Punjab and places I think I can't pronounce.
Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Yeah, I can pronounce Balochistan, but it was Sindh. Yes, but the Khyber.
Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
That's the one. Yeah. So a number of different areas, a number of different languages, a number of ethnic groups. So what would you say characterizes the key differences between these ethnic groups?
Well, I think so. Well, I'm not that old, so I wouldn't know what was actually Pakistan living over there. You can only understand by stories of what people tell other people, you know. But I think so people were able to express their regional sort of culture more. What happened, I think, so after General Ziaul Haq is more of an Islamization of Pakistan, where everyone became more radically Muslim, or be like they were probably pulled by radical Islam a bit more. So all over Pakistan, you got this people, um, which didn't favor literature or arts or any endeavors which were
And what kind
intellectual.
of radical Islam was General al-Haq? What, Wahhabi or Muslim
I
Brotherhood type thing?
I would
Or
say like he was Sunni, so I'm not sure if it was Wahhabi or not, but I think so. He was generally Sunni because he's the one who fought against Palestinians as well for Jordan, and he fought against because they were Shias. So he was Sunni, but he was a Sunni radical, and it's not as if it doesn't even matter how much of a radical he himself was. It's what he unleashed. Because before him, Pakistan had the Pakistani Penal Code, which was based upon English common law, and what he did was he put Sharia law into the Pakistani Penal Code, and obviously Sharia law will eventually supersede English common law, and that's the radicalization of not just of the people, even if the people didn't agree, by law it came in.
because I understand that the Balokis, they want to kind of break away, and there is.
Balochi is always like Balochistan has always been separate. All of the provinces have been like sort of separate, anyways, because they're so ethnically separate and their languages are so separate. They have wanted to separate from Pakistan for a very long time, and there are things that the Pakistani government, under the heavy rule of probably I would say like the Punjabi involvement, they have done a lot of harm and a lot of atrocities against the Balochis, and they wanted to separate. And there has been rumors before as well that they were colluding with Indian intelligence or something of that sort for separation. I don't know how much of that was true or not, but they had always wanted to separate, and right now as well, those troubles are becoming even more violent.
So, which is the ethnic group like that tends to dominate in Pakistan? Is it the Punjabi?
Punjabis, yeah, because they're the most, and they hold most of the agricultural, equity within Pakistan. They hold the most political sway within Pakistan. They have the most number of seats in parliament, and they tend to,
Of course, they
take
didn't.
more
Of course, they didn't used
resources.
to. Back in the old days, the
No,
largest,
no,
the largest by population area of Pakistan was East Pakistan,
this is why they broke up, because the Punjabis couldn't have their way. So
and so they could just dominate it.
yeah.
And so then, of course, they sent in, and this gets into what we're going to talk about in relation to UK. They literally the Punjabi imams
Mm,
issued, as I understand it, fatwas
mm,
saying that it was okay to go into East Pakistan, what's now South
yeah,
Bangladesh, um, and commit war crimes,
yeah,
and in particular the raping of women. And the war was in 71, I think I'm right in saying,
yeah,
and in 1972 there was something like um, I think it was about 250,000 women
more,
that were
more,
raped.
yeah.
And there was 50,000 war babies.
Mm,
There was all these women with STDs.
yeah.
There was about 30,000 abortions,
Hmm.
all in the 1 year.
Yeah.
So what they did was just, yeah, and this was to fellow, it was to Hindus as well, because there was a Hindu minority
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
but this was to fellow Muslims, and they said
mm,
they weren't real Muslims and it was okay.
yeah. I mean, it was state-sanctioned rape, and this is the thing as well. It wasn't just the imams doing it; they used the imams to do it. It was state-sanctioned rape because they justified it. They always find ways to justify it. I think so. There's a problem within the Punjabi culture or something that they use rape as a way of justice, delivering justice. Um, there are a few cases within Punjab where they're tribe when they have tribal issues. So if let's say you are of a tribe, you have wronged me somehow, then to correct that wrong, I am allowed for someone from my tribe to rape one of your gang rape one of your daughters, and that would resolve that problem. That woman had nothing to do with it. Those men have nothing to do with it. This is their way of resolving issues. So there has to be some other ethnically historic
Is that
reasons they have.
sanctified by the Quran
No,
or the Hadith or anything like
no,
that?
no. This is a problem as well. Like, this is actually not Islamic. I think so this predates Islam, because you can find excuses within Islam, let's say, like sex slaves,
Or
like you
you
raping
can
the sex
take any
slaves and
woman
stuff.
that your right arm can hold.
Exactly. In times of war and stuff. But this is not in times of war. This is like people trying to resolve their disputes, their tribal disputes. So they can use Islam, but this means that it predates Islam, or what the practices were of these people, and why they're more susceptible to taking Islam anyways so much on board, because Islam allows for certain things which are their sexual deviant proclivities, and they just take that on board. That's why they're more susceptible
Well, the religion
to
in
Islam.
that area before Islam was Hinduism.
Yeah,
So the question is there, do they engage in such behaviors in any form of Hinduism? I don't know, but I know they do the horrible punishments of women
yeah.
in Hinduism. So no, that's interesting.
Hmm.
But anyway, in Bangladesh, it was a time of war.
Yeah.
And so I suppose you could argue that's how
Mm.
they could theologically justify
Yeah.
what they did.
Yeah.
And then the tribunal, whatever you call the Peace and Justice Commission into this
Hmm.
took a very long time
Mm.
for all of the information to come out
Yeah.
on just how Bangladesh was brutalized.
Yeah. It was because my grandfather from my mom's side, her father, he fought in that war as well, and he was, as far as I know, like, he was left behind enemy lines and he had to come back somehow, but he was fighting somewhere in India and Bangladesh something. Um, there were a lot of rumors as well. Like, people knew that this has happened. People who didn't agree with it, especially people who fought for Pakistan, who were from other areas than Punjab. Because they were not part of this. They weren't told to do these sort of things, and they were against these things theologically, as well as, as a human being. They didn't agree with such things, because apart from, like, everyone in Pakistan already, I think so, already had a feeling that Punjab is taking advantage and trying to take advantage of the political system within Pakistan. They're trying to get more seats. That's why they won't accept the Bengalis as their prime minister, because he actually won. So there was already discontent between that, and I think so after that the discontent even grew more between the Urdu speaking people and Punjabis, and Punjabis against Balochis, they them against Pathans, and they started separating even then. So there were huge differences, huge disagreements. So it's not all Pakistanis would had committed those crimes, and they would agree with those crimes as well, to do those crimes. But it doesn't matter, because the majority of people sorry, the majority of Pakistanis who are in Britain, 90% of them are ethnically Punjabis. So that's
Now,
what you get.
I assumed, and I did I think I did a video on this,
Hmm.
that the reason why all of the men, or the vast majority of the men that were involved in these Pakistani grooming gangs, were Punjabi, was just historical. It was that we, the British, kind of industrialized, or at least brought in infrastructure into the Punjab.
Hmm.
We knew that the people in the Punjab could speak English,
Hmm.
and so which was not the case in Balochistan. It was rural. We didn't have much to do with it. People couldn't speak English.
Hmm.
And so we literally went there advertising for labour, and also in Kashmir,
Hmm.
and so it's those people that have come over,
Hmm.
and therefore it's those people that have engaged in grooming behaviour. We can talk whatever gang rape. We can talk about why one would do that from an evolutionary perspective. I've got ideas on it,
Hmm.
but you had a lot of it in the Congo War.
Hmm.
It's not unique to Islam,
Hmm.
but do you think there's something about the culture of the Punjabis which is relevant to what's been happening in places like Rotherham?
I'm actually sometimes I'm very trying to be careful about commenting on this because I know I have a prejudice against Punjabis, right? Growing up as an Urdu speaking people, we had a different view of the Punjabis. We always saw them as uncultured and uncouth people compared to how we were as Urdu speaking people. And there is an undertone over there of like, there is an ethnic war sort of between these two people, at least disagreements between these two people.
In what sense do the Urdu speakers regard the Punjabis as uncultured?
The way that they behave, that
How
they
do they behave? How do they?
like, talking very loudly, not being polite, not giving way to people, their sense of humor. Punjabis are more likely to enjoy slapstick humor compared to Urdu speaking people who prefer more intellectual humor. All sort of things like, Urdu speaking people are most likely, they like tongue twisters, they like, innuendos, they like sarcasm. Punjabis do not have that in their, culture that much. So they seem a bit uncultured to an Urdu speaking people and how they behave and how, and not just that, even within parliament, even within politics, you can see the difference between a Punjabi politician of how they act, how brazen they are in their lies and their deceit compared to maybe an Urdu speaking people or even a Sindhi or even like other sort of Pathans specifically, like they're known in Pakistan to be more honest people, the Pathans. And they don't engage in deceit that much. They are more in army and like they're represented over there a lot. So there are differences, I would say, and I think so. Maybe they were just inbuilt prejudices because of how they treated the Urdu speaking people. Um, Urdu speaking people are the a very small minority within Pakistan, and Urdu language is their native language. All the other parts of the Pakistan, their native language is not, their mother tongue is not Urdu. Urdu is a second language for them, so they have their regional languages, and Urdu is a second language
Is
for
Urdu
all of
not
them.
is Urdu not a kind of lingua franca throughout Pakistan, or is that English?
It's sort of English, yeah. So English and Urdu. So law is written in both Urdu and English because of that reason as well. There are parts of Pakistan that actually don't know Urdu. I've traveled to places in the north of Pakistan. They can't speak Urdu, so I have to speak in English with them because they're speaking their regional language, which I don't understand. So it's interesting dynamics over there, but I think so. There is a perception of the Punjabis being uncultured.
Right, and so how does this then fit into what we're seeing in these northern towns, where in
Mm.
these towns where there's large numbers of Punjabis?
So in the 1960s, when Harold Wilson thought it would be a good idea to get these people in and replace them as laborers, um, in the north of England, these were mainly people around Mirpur, those villages around Mirpur and stuff outside on the outskirts of Kashmir. And the reason was because there was a dam that was built and thousands of people were misplaced. So these people were free and sort of like, could be used as laborers. He got 50, 60,000 of those people eventually in and settled them into England. These people were laborers, yeah, but I don't think so. They would have even assimilated into a metropolitan city within Pakistan, even at that time. So these weren't like your educated and those sort of people. So these people did come over here. Other Pakistani people came over here as well, and they, because they were less in numbers, they was where they weren't in a place where they could have their parallel societies. They didn't assimilate over there, but those were when they weren't in those societies, they tried to assimilate into more metropolitan cities within England. um these people, how what has happened over time, I think so it's not that those people are the fault because they didn't engage in rape gangs or anything at that time. It's because of them, because they always maintain their parallel societies. To do that, they have to marry people from Pakistan. So they keep on getting those people in. So their sons will marry like their cousins or whatever from Pakistan, and they will keep on fettering people in. So over time, as Pakistan has changed, the people that this parallel community has been bringing in have been more and more radical
Right.
over time. So that's why the the newer people that we are seeing that have come because of these people are just naturally more radical because of the changes that have happened in Pakistan.
I suppose, do these kind of fundamentalist backward people within Pakistan have more children than educated Pakistanis?
Yeah, yeah, they would. They would.
So
Because their
essentially,
standard of living is low. They're living in villages, whatever. And mostly they're using children as labor, as child labor. So they need to have more children. So, within educated class within Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, Quetta, people will have less children. 3 at most, 4 at most, not more than that.
right. So, but they're having 6 or 7 kids in
Yeah,
these.
because they're using them as child labor.
Right, and they're not very intelligent, perhaps, and
Mm.
they're very fundamentalist.
Yeah. Even if they are intelligent, their intelligence is not, you know, explored. It's not utilized. It's not, it's beaten out of them, even if there was anything over there, but and the propensity of them marrying their cousins, first cousins so much, 60-70%, that's going to result in eventually
Reducing
them having,
IQ
yeah.
slightly, yes. So,
Yeah.
right, so they are continuously imported, is what you're
Mm,
saying,
yeah.
and this has made a founded, Kashmiri, Punjabi, whatever
Yeah.
community,
Yeah.
more and more and more extreme over time,
Yeah.
and perhaps more ethnocentric over time.
Yeah.
Because you marry your cousin, then you're
Mm,
creating a genetic
yeah.
cluster.
Mm. And over time, if you keep on doing that and you are growing in strength and you're growing in numbers, so you see less and less point of wanting to assimilate. Why would you want to assimilate? Why not assimilate Britain into you? That's those sort of ideologies come into. And as the left has progressively, with their Marxist ideologies, taken over most of the British culture, or subverting the British culture, they're going to use that as well to their advantage, and that's what they're doing to their advantage. And then came the time of mass immigration, which actually blew up everything. Because even before that time, this could have been managed easily. But when mass migration came in, people even more radical came in who were not related to these people, even these people at all. So they had no way of controlling them. And those are the radical Muslims who eventually, took over. Those were the radical Muslims who took over the communities. They have taken over their communities, and they are leaving them. They basically have no choice, because if these radical Muslims take over their mosques and stuff, and the imams are telling you that, then who are you as a moderate Muslim who don't know their religion properly to challenge them? And I think that's the dynamics that are playing out.
Yeah. Okay. And so, but why then? What's your theory on why they have groomed and raped and handed around like sweeties these white girls? What's the why? What are they? Why are they doing this?
Um, there's a part of, I mean, I've seen that, like, because in Finland this has happened as well, and Syrians who are doing that, and in other countries, Sweden, it's happening as well, and there are other thing doing that, and that tells me it's something. It is a fundamental thing to do with Islam, the ideology of them growing their ummah, their Islamic ummah, that they want the hope to grow into the West. The way that they see it, that they're conquering these countries by their people, and these are the bounties of you know their conquest. The way that they can squash the spirit of the people is to degrade their own people that much, you know um
I suppose
and then,
particularly degrade their own women to be able to say to these men,
yeah,
"You're so weak.
that you can't even
You
defend
can't
yourself
even.
in
You
front
I
of
can't." And
children.
also won't.
Yeah.
And I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting a point that we don't like to talk about. People like to sort of simplify this and say, oh, it's just these evil Pakistani men, and they are grooming and then raping these white girls,
Mm.
and they are exploiting them and whatever. But you've got to ask yourself, well, what does it say about Britain as a
Yeah.
society
Yeah.
that it seems to me you're obviously gonna, if you come into a country as a foreigner, as a
Mm.
conspicuous foreigner of a
Mm.
different race,
Mm.
and you're poorer than other people,
Mm.
then you're gonna want to you're going to feel resentful,
Mm,
you're going to feel angry,
yeah.
and this tends to make people excluded.
Mm,
This tends to make people more religious,
mm,
and you will find in the religion, as you will in the Old Testament,
mm,
justifications for quite unpleasant behavior,
yeah.
killing the enemy, and in the case of Islam, taking the women as sex slaves. And so we shouldn't really be surprised that they would react like that. And so
Mm.
so what does it say about the British that we've let this happen?
I think so. This is what I found. Like, I think so. They're so far removed from that ideology. So the British people are so far removed that they cannot understand those sort of ideology anymore, because they're so far behind in their time that they could have understood this. But what we have done over here is people who are so far removed from that sort of thinking being introduced with people who are acting like they were in the past, and this is why they can't comprehend each other. They are trying to see the best of these people, but there isn't. And what usually happens as well, I think so, is exceptions that become dangerous, in a way. Like, let's say if I'm an exception to the rule, that I am not partaking in that behavior or do not have that mentality, and people only meet people like me, then they would say, oh, Pakistanis are okay, they're fine, people of Pakistani ethnicity are fine. And in that guise would come in people who are actually not fine, the majority of those people who are not fine. Because if the majority of the Pakistanis were fine, then you wouldn't find them having such sexual crimes in their own country as well, against their own people as well. So
It's not even just a Muslim thing. If you think it is a weapon of war. It's
mhm,
what you do to undermine the enemy.
that's what Vikings did. And
It's what the Russians did. I
yeah,
mean, I think I've read estimations that about 1/3 of German women under the age of 30 were raped
yeah,
when Germany was occupied by Russia.
yeah. That's what they did to Poland as well. And my wife is Polish. Like, they have all these stories about Russians. They actually have these stories that when the Nazis came over Poland, they were less cruel to certain parts of Polish people than the Russians were.
Oh, yes, I've
This
heard this.
is, yeah,
I've heard this, that the people much preferred the Nazi occupation
yeah,
to the Russian
yeah,
occupation, and the Nazis came as invaders of their
yeah.
country.
Now, before we continue, I'd like to do something rather exciting. I know that you Generation Z people, you want to have read all of the based books, you want to have imbibed all of the most radical and important scientific knowledge, but you don't particularly like reading very much. So what if there was an app that would take those books, summarize them for you, and then read them back to you in less than 25 minutes? Well, fortunately, such an app exists, and that app is called Legion.com. They have, for example, my book, The Past is a Future Country, The Coming Conservative Demographic Revolution, by myself and my friend Ollie Rayner Hills, in which we look at the way that there is clearly going to be a shift based on breeding patterns among the more intelligent back towards us being right-wing, and the return, therefore, of a kind of genetically right-wing society, a kind of neo-Byzantium. And here it is, The Past is a Future Country. And so you don't even have to read the book if you don't want to. This can inject it straight from the phone into your brain box. And if you sign up today with the code TJH, then of course you can get a 10% discount. So Legion.com, sign up now. All the base knowledge from your phone direct to your brain.
Yeah, I've heard a story from a friend of mine in Poland that his grandmother had. What was it she said? That she had nothing bad really to say about the Nazis in the occupation of Poland, but the Russians absolutely
Yeah.
despised.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the Nazis were bad to most of the Poland when they put them in concentration camps and stuff, but they didn't treat all of them in the same way. The thing was, like, when Russians were coming over, they were they wanted to do these things, these bad things and stuff. Because there were stories that they were going in people's home trying to get food because they didn't have any food, so they were very depraved of all things. But you're right to say, like, all such societies have used, even Germans in the past when they were Germanic tribes and stuff, they have used rape as a way, as a form of war. All these older sort of civilizations have used that, and Islam is just stuck in that mentality for 1400 years. and they haven't
And
even.
also, I suppose, though, it is true that you do tend to get, and perhaps there is a level on which, depending on their age and with issues of consent and whatever, but putting that aside,
Mm,
you do tend to get collaboration horizontal,
mm,
i.e., the idea that women sexually select for power and status and
mm,
that sort of thing. And if you're able to invade, then what that is signaling to the woman is that you're the people with the future status.
yeah.
And therefore, you're the ones to be with. There were many cases of this in relationships between German soldiers
Mm,
and French women in the war, Norwegian, various others,
mm,
Finnish,
mm,
in the and even on the Channel Islands, when the Germans occupied the Channel Islands, there were relationships between the local women and these German soldiers. That women like status, and there's a degree to which, um,
I guess you hold the resources and you hold, so you promise security more than the,
and
yeah.
you knew you promised security, but because you've managed to successfully invade, you're telling
Yeah.
them that you have the power, you're the way forward.
Mm,
And I wonder if there's something about that with Pakistanis in these northern towns. First of all, they tend to be businessmen,
mm,
which a lot of British people in these kind of poorer towns are just unemployed.
yeah.
And secondly, they tend to be quite flash with their cash,
Mm,
nice
mm,
cars, and
yeah.
it's materialistic, and
Yeah.
that's going to impress, I'm afraid,
Yeah.
a certain kind
I
of girl.
mean, I would say like that would be the reason, or why we see such or such that they are able to exploit those British girls that much. But if they were women, that would be a different case. These aren't women. These are children. So the reason why they're going after the children is because they're vulnerable and they are easy to impress upon, because they are from broken homes, they are misguided, so they give them the things that they don't have access to. They can't buy the cigarettes, they can't buy the drugs, they can't buy all those things. So if that was the case, that they're showing their strength, that would be upon the woman and not children. So.
Yes, all right, true. But I suppose there is a level on which even children are impressed by such things.
Hmm,
I'm saying they don't have consent. They
yeah,
don't have. They
yeah,
can't consent. Fine,
yeah,
but there is a degree to which it, and they know this perhaps, as you
mm,
say,
yeah,
it's going to impress them.
yeah.
And so then you end up with why is it? Do you think it's just that they are manipulative and psychopathic, and thus want to go for little girls? I mean, as young as
Mm,
12 or
mm,
11.
yeah.
Or is there some weird thing in the culture that they just like really, really young
I
girls?
think so. See, because most of the people say, oh, they're just psychotic and they're just evil people, and that's why, like, they're just pedophiles. I don't think so. They are pedophiles. That's why they're doing it. I think so. It is a cultural thing because it's acceptable in their culture to marry girls when they're so young, just after puberty. Sorry, just after puberty when they're so young. Uh, so they don't see that as a wrong, and has been embedded in their culture, and their mums would have married their fathers when they were that young. So they don't see that as an issue. um when they go after like really young girls, which are pre-puberty, like 9 years old, 8 years old, 7 years old, that shows proper sexual deviance, that there is something wrong mentally with them as well. I think so. It's a combination of that, and also it's a combination of their easy targets. It's much harder to do that to a fully grown woman as compared to 11 or 12-year-old girls or 13-year-old girls. So it's a complex of issues. I don't If we just say that, okay, they're evil, eventually their actions are evil. Eventually I would like them, to see them hanged for what they're doing. But how to explain that? If we just say they're evil and just dismiss all of it, we don't really get to the bottom of why it's happening, why, and also why it's important for us to stop the immigration coming from these countries, why it is important.
Yeah, because they would hang in Pakistan for
Mm,
behavior like this,
yeah.
which is something we can learn perhaps from Pakistan. But they engage in this exploitative behavior. They manipulate them. Is there a level on which I mean, you're married to a white girl.
Yeah.
Is there a level on which, as a Pakistani or whatever in the UK, among other Pakistanis,
Hmm. Hmm.
there is prestige to being able to say,
Hmm.
I'm with a white girl?
It wouldn't be when it comes to working class girls, to be honest, because they don't see them as prestigious, as far as I can see. That they don't see them as prestigious or something. They only see them as things for conquest. As horrible as it is to say, um, they don't see marrying a white working class British girl as anything prestigious because she doesn't have good family or something. The things that they value she doesn't have,
So they
and their parents wouldn't want them to marry white
no,
girls
so
anyways.
when they talk about I presume that I've read books like what's her name, Mirza Ali. She's a writer, and she did this
Oh,
sort of autobiographical novel about what it's like to be an Indian girl
mm,
in England in the 50s.
yeah,
And she in the book that the attitude of this is Hindus, I think,
mm,
but towards white girls, it wouldn't working class white girls,
mm.
is that they're just
Oh yeah,
dirty.
it's a very
Dirty. They
very
have no morals. They do
yeah,
anything.
yeah. I mean, there was such a when I was in Pakistan, there was such a weird thing that people had, like in some pockets. I heard somewhere that, oh, the reason why these white girls can go around in skirts in these cold weather is because they put pig oil on their legs. Uh, they make up such weird stories. They do really have racial hatred, like especially Pakistanis. I think so. They do have deep rooted racial hatred against the white British people, specifically white British people, not other white Europeans, specifically white British people, because I think so. They are still in that mindset that their rule of India, as the Muslims' rule of India, was disrupted because of the British, because they came over there and they disrupted it. So they see that as the British are the reason why they lost India,
Yeah.
you know, and they only have Pakistan now. So if it wasn't for them, they would have remained conquerors over there. So I think so.
Well, to be fair, if
Um,
they'd behaved themselves during the Sepoy Rebellion,
yeah,
rather than massacring loads of innocent English
but
women,
that's their way. That's how they are. They destroyed India by conquering it. This is why I don't even call Pakistan. Pakistan is not a legitimate state. It shouldn't exist.
because that was when the what was it called? The guy that was based in New Delhi, the
Hmm.
what's the Sultan? What's the word I want? But anyway, the king.
Hmm.
That was when he lost. That was when the British took direct control of
Yeah.
various parts of
Yeah.
India and left other parts, both Muslim and Hindu.
Hmm.
But they took control of that area
Hmm.
because that which had been the one that had been run by Muslims,
Yeah.
the Golden Triangle around
Hmm.
there, because they engaged in a massive rebellion.
Exactly. Yeah. It's yeah, but it's such old history as well, and it shows me like why are they keeping those old seated resentments with them? Why can't they move forward? Why can't they say, okay, what has happened, let's move forward. How can we have the best expression of ourselves? But they don't. They know they're not capable enough to do those things.
Well, look
They
at
have these
Iran now. They've just
resentments.
arrested 2 British tourists claiming they're spies.
Mm,
Now, the Iranians hate the British. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know why you'd go there. They,
yeah,
for
yeah,
the colonial reasons,
yeah,
they hate the British
yeah,
with a passion you can't believe.
yeah,
And it's I don't know why you would go there, but it's for the same kind of reasons.
yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, so there is that, and there is this. I suppose as well, if you move into a country and you're poor and you're
Hmm.
excluded, then you come up with a cope, and the cope is that the
Yeah.
British are dirty.
Resentment is a very, very dangerous emotion. It makes different people do different things. I think so that plays a lot, and they become so resentful, especially as you're saying, like they're poor people especially when they're coming as poor people, and they see other people enjoying things, and they can't have those things because they find out that okay they're not capable enough to have those things or whatever, so they find ways to get them because that's all that matters to them, that materialistic outlook.
But moving back to the question, then,
Hmm. Hmm.
if it's a middle class brown person
Hmm.
and a middle class girl, then with other Indians or other Pakistanis in the UK,
Hmm.
is it considered prestigious to have an English girl?
I guess yes. I guess it would be. Um, but also like I don't have personal experience of it, so I can't really say that much. But
Well, you have a white girl.
yeah, but I don't have, as in, I don't have the personal experience of, because I don't have any brown friends.
Oh, I see what you
Or
mean.
yeah.
Because a friend of mine in Oulu,
Hmm.
who's Indian extraction, that's what he told me. That
Hmm.
it's considered among other
Mm.
fellow, and it's considered it's wow. You've got
Like
white,
considered a coup.
yeah, you got
Like,
a white girl.
yeah,
Well done.
yeah,
You know, and I'm
yeah.
just wondering why would that be?
Maybe it's like, maybe they have insecurities about themselves, physical insecurities, maybe like physical capability wise, like sexual capability wise, or whatever insecurities they have. So if some of them like pull, a white girl, a white British girl, they might be seen as, okay, this person has game, or whatever you might call it. Like,
Because
they
he's
can
conquered.
actually,
He's in a sense he's
yeah,
symbolically conquered
yeah,
the
yeah,
native people.
yeah,
Got one of their
yeah,
girls.
yeah, which is so perverse, because the only way that you can actually assimilate, actually, this is a very good point, because the only way that you can assimilate into a different culture is by, eventually, you can't assimilate, but your future generations can, if you mix in with the ethnicity of that host country. But it's very important to note that these Pakistanis or these Indians don't usually have their women assimilate into the British men. Maybe Indians do, but not that many
Not
Pakistanis.
that many Indians really.
Yeah. So they are seeing, when men do go on with these women, they are seeing that as a conquest, because the men are doing it. If they wanted to assimilate, if the intention was to assimilate, then the same would be for the
Because
women.
what you
Why
would
are they not
expect,
marrying their daughters?
women sexually select for status and all that, and so what
Mm.
you would expect is that it would be the women, it would be
Mm.
women, Indian, whatever women, that would be marrying white men.
Yeah.
Which is of course what happened in the Raj.
Mm.
I mean, that's why Anglo-Indians exist.
Yeah.
It was overwhelmingly British soldiers
Yeah.
marrying Muslim girls.
Yeah.
And there was, what was that guy's name? Was it Dalrymple or something? That was the guy's name. He was called the White Raja, and he went over there and
No.
he married the daughter of the Prime Minister of Hyderabad. This is in
Mm.
the late 18th century, before
Yeah.
race mixing became less
Mm.
acceptable for a while, and then converted to Islam.
Mm.
And used to wear a Muslim clothes,
Yeah.
a hooker, and
Yeah.
Lieutenant Colonel Kirkpatrick, that was his name, Kirkpatrick. So that it tended to happen that way round, and thus we have Anglo-Indians.
Yeah.
It's almost like a lower status ethnic group has got a woman from a higher status ethnic group.
Yes. Yeah.
Respect, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's, I guess,
Yeah.
how it might be working.
Yeah.
Now that this has come out,
Mm.
I mean, the thing is, a lot of people say, I was at this conference the other day, there was a guy called Douglas Murray,
Mm.
and they say very extreme things about Islam. Another woman there, Ayan Hirsi Ali, have you heard of her?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you ready for the future of the West?